Hello Uganda, good evening and welcome to this edition of On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. In fact, we are coming to you from the office of retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye on Katonga Road here in Nakasero in Kampala. He's fresh from launching another pressure group, the People's Front for Transition. Dr. Kizza Besigye is our guest. Dr. Kizza Besigye, thank you so much for giving us your time to talk to us this evening, and thank you for allowing to speak to NTV Uganda.
Great pleasure always, Patrick, to be hosted by you and by the NTV On the Spot program. A very good evening to all the NTV viewers and audience, wherever you may be joining us from this evening. Glad to have you on this show.
You are just coming from launching another pressure group, People's Front for Transition. What is this all about?
Well, I think it speaks for itself happily. I don't have to describe it. It is a front, meaning that it is a combination, it's a confluence of several actors, several organizations with a common objective of working for a transition in our country. And the transition the country desperately needs is a transition from gun rule, whose effects I believe most Ugandans would have been very, very much aware of, adversely, I must add, to a dispensation where there is free will of Ugandans and where activities within the country are influenced and controlled by the people of Uganda.
There is a constitution of the Republic of Uganda. In fact, tomorrow it will be making 26 years since it was promulgated in 1995. And there's a timetable within which political leaders, come to the people seeking the mandate. You have Uganda's supreme law, and you have a constitution, and you have a timetable for electing leaders. What else do you need if those two things are there?
You see, a constitution is a facilitating instrument. A constitution does not act, people act. And people can act in accordance with what has been agreed on, which is what a constitution provides, or against what has been agreed on. And it is when there is action against what has been agreed on that then people must protest and say, no, this is not the country we wanted to live in. As I must point out, there was a constitution in 1962 when Uganda became independent. You are talking about 59 years of independence. What happened to the constitution of 1962? Why did it go away? Was it amended? What took it? It was overthrown. There was a constitution that was following that, which was made in 1967. What happened to it? Is it the one we are still following? No. It was overthrown. So there was a constitution indeed made in 1995. Is that what we are still following? Absolutely not.
Yeah, but you see, the same constitution, I think Article 18, yes, talks about the possibility of amending it periodically, and the mechanism of amending are also given. Some articles can be amended through parliament, others cannot because they are entrenched. If you have the supreme law of the land and you have a timetable through which leaders can be elected, Dr. Besigye, then why do you have to go for another pressure group?
We can talk about both. As I have pointed out, even the 1962 Constitution, the 1967 Constitution had amendment clauses. They were not amended. So there are two things that happen One is violation, outright violation of a constitution that is still there. You know, when you see what has been going on, the terrorizing of citizens, it's not provided for in the constitution. Killing of people wantonly by people using guns of the state.
So
the people
let the Ugandan get to know from you. How is this pressure group you have just launched today, People's Front for Transition, going to work, going to empower the people, or even open the eyes for those who cannot see?
So, first, the constitution you are talking about, which has provisions for amendment, happily, and I'm proud that at least I was part of the people in the Constituent Assembly that made the current constitution we are talking about. We also provided for Article number 3. In fact, I believe the importance of those articles, although every article is as important ostensibly as another, but the flow of the articles of the Constitution are instructive. The first article talks about where the power lies in this country, that it lies with the people, and how they will exercise it. Number 3 talks about what happens when how the power is supposed to be exercised is subverted. When the constitution is subverted, what happens? And it imposes a duty on each and every Ugandan. So as we talk, you have a duty, Patrick, as much as I have, to do everything within our power to ensure that what was intended by the Constitution is protected. And that is partly what this whole struggle we are talking about is premised. Let me...
But you know, Dr. Besigye, people looking at you and hearing you right now, there is a government, legitimate government, elected by the people, you know, accepted and welcomed by the entire world. That's the reality. Just the other day, President Museveni was addressing the United Nations conference.
Yes.
Just a few days back, he was attending a swearing in Ethiopia.
Of course, you know that.
He's a legitimately elected leader of Uganda, accepted by the world.
You know.
That's a fact.
You know that Mr. Museveni, whom you say is legitimately accepted by the world.
It is.
Let me tell you that he did not come to office through means provided by the Constitution. I hope there is no debate about that.
You escorted him to power.
Yes.
You and your colleagues came stepping on dead bodies in Kampala to take power.
Absolutely. So, if Mr. Museveni, according to you, is now legitimate and welcome and accepted in the whole world, it would mean that people who come, as Museveni did, are also legitimate from what you've just said. And indeed they are, because legitimacy is what the people, the majority of the people in a country espouse, what they desire is what is legitimate. And that is to the same extent, actually, that I believe Mr. Museveni is totally illegitimate, should not be a president of Uganda at all. And indeed, our pursuit now is to push him out, because he shouldn't be there.
So you hold a view that the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi won the election?
You see, winning an election...
Is that what you believe?
I actually believe he did. But you see, winning an election is not demonstrable in an environment that is not governed by the rule of law.
Demonstrable when you have a parliament of almost 500 and your party has less than 100? When you have a district almost 140 something and you don't have even many district chairpersons? When you have youth leaders and we cannot see your leaders
Patrick,
in leadership?
That path you are taking is a very tired path.
But how? It's a reflection of your influence and popularity on the ground.
It's not, and you know it. The other day, you saw President Alpha Conde, who has just gone through an election. He's supposed to have been elected by great majority of Guineans. You saw what was happening in Guinea after he had been overthrown. The spontaneous rejoicing all over the country should tell you that, you know, people who are in power can project them in any kind of way to show that they are legitimate. It doesn't confer legitimacy to them. You saw here President Umar al-Bashir, who was of course a close friend of Mr. Museveni here, because even after the International Criminal Court had indicted him for having committed offenses or suspected at least to have committed offenses or crimes against humanity, he was a very welcome guest of Mr. Museveni. Let me tell you. And eventually, he was thrown out of office, having been elected, according to your standard, by 81% of Sudanese. And I'm sure you must have seen, just before his overthrow and incarceration, because I think soon he will be on his way to the International Criminal Court indeed, the amount of energy and people, the numbers of people in Sudan that wanted him out. So let's go back to the basics. The basics are these, that you see this country, the crisis we are trying to deal with is a crisis where we are in a country where no single leader has ever handed over power peacefully to another. Not a single one. 59 years, no leader has ever handed over power to another one. Does that sound to you normal? It can't be. That now you have a leader for 36 years, has been in office, and in every election, people must die. In every election, there must be a warlike situation, tanks, armored vehicles, and soldiers all over the place, and the killing, and the beating, and that is the election through which a person who is so many years in office must go through. That we are living in a country, in fact, where that same person, you know, has using very, very clearly illegal processes.
But if you can hold that,
destroyed the constitution, destroyed the constitution, because the constitution that was made while he was in office.
Many times after every election, Dr. Besigye, you have tried to seek for justice. You have gone to the temples of justice to challenge the elections.
Yes.
And in some cases, you have lost those cases, including the recent one.
Yes.
So if the judiciary has actually looked into the allegations you're talking about, of the bribery, of the intimidation, of the killing, and the judiciary, which is the other form of government, has given legitimacy to the current government.
You see, Patrick, as I have said, let's deal with first things first. Let's interrogate what I believe is a crisis of our country that we seek to deal with.
Okay.
A crisis, as I have pointed out, where no leader in 6 decades has ever had, never a transition that is peaceful. 6 decades, you know, before you were born, that this thing was going on. You know, that is a political crisis. If you live in a country like that, it's a political crisis. And where so many people must die for political processes to go ahead, that is a crisis. And this crisis, Patrick, is not just a crisis of politics. It translates into a crisis of people. Because now we live, you know, I've been telling people at the launch of this front that at independence, the leaders of independence crystallized the core of the Ugandan problems into 3 things: ignorance, disease, and poverty. And they set out to deal with these cardinal problems within the country. And indeed, these are matters that impact people. They are crises for people. When we talk about development, sometimes, and this is what I see regrettably, people, you know, the praise singers of the NRM junta say, you know, they have developed all these buildings, they have developed a highway, those are developments, fine, but they don't define the conditions of people. There is infrastructure development, which is totally different from human development. What is critical and what we all aspire to as a people is human development. The crisis at independence of human development, ignorance, disease, and poverty, where is it today? Has it made strides? Has it intensified? And my very clear understanding is that actually we have a crisis that has multiplied manifold in terms of ignorance. And I was, you know, explaining to people that, look, what Museveni should be ashamed of himself, that the colonial government, which we were fighting to free ourselves from, educated him. He was able to go to government schools that had quality education from primary school up to university. They educated him. He was educated by colonial government and by the immediate post-colonial government. Government schools. Look at government schools today. 59 years on. Look at what is happening in our primary schools, in our secondary schools. And now they have been closed for 2 years. There is no education in Uganda for 2 years. Uganda is today the only country in Africa. And if it is the only country in Africa, I dare say it's the only country in the world today whose schools are closed, in spite of the pandemic. Everybody, the pandemic is in every country of the world. But today, Uganda is the only country whose indeed dilapidated, destroyed schools are closed. So there is the crisis of ignorance has intensified. People now finish primary school, they can't even write their names. And that's why they abandon. 1 million kids who go to primary school, only 25% go to reach P7. Because there is no knowledge. There is no knowledge in the schools.
These people...
Look at the health care. Look at the health care. I'm a health practitioner. Look at the health care. How was Mulago at independence? How is Mulago today in terms of health care, giving health to people? There is a crisis in health care. There is a crisis of poverty everywhere. People have no livelihoods. Our country has been destroyed. This is what we call human development. So if you have a crisis that has intensified, why has this crisis of health, of education, of poverty, why has it intensified? Because people have no say. Because people are captive.
So explain to me,
because
Dr.
the
Besigye,
institutions.
explain to the viewer, Dr. Besigye, how the People's Front for Transition is going to fight poverty, ignorance, and disease.
So I was telling you first, the reason the crisis in Uganda has intensified of ignorance. And you see, sometimes people cry there are no jobs. Jobs are created by knowledge. If you have no knowledge, you cannot have jobs. Even those who come out of Makerere, they have no knowledge. And so they cannot have jobs. Even if jobs were there, they are unemployable. You see? So with this, why I say this is a crisis. Because, you know, look at people like the fellow who made Google, the fellow who made Facebook, the fellow who made all these, Bill Gates. They dropped out of university actually having acquired enough knowledge to solve problems. Because knowledge is intended to solve problems. It is through solving problems that you get jobs. So your question is, so how do we resolve this? This crisis, this triple crisis, is created because people have no say, have no influence. People have no rights in their country. They are captive. So the resources of the country serve those who captured the country, who hold the country captive. Those are served. This crisis is not among them. The children of those who captured Uganda, who hold Uganda captive, they are at school. They are not at, they are learning. It's your children, you the captive, who are not at school.
I just want you.
Who are not getting knowledge.
Yes, so how do you free the captives?
But this,
how do you intend? How do you free the captives?
I want you to. So first of all, we are in this situation because we are captive. So that's the second stage. I want our viewers to follow systematically that the crisis we have is because we are captive. Captives are like slaves. We are like slaves. We slave for others. So the solution is that we must free ourselves from enslavement, from captivity. And how is what the front seeks to answer.
Okay.
So, first of all, the front, as I pointed out earlier, recognized that elections will not free us. Why? Because elections are processes through which people make decisions about how they will be governed and who will govern them. That is the power that captives don't have. Captives don't have the power to make those decisions. So actually the struggle is to empower citizens to have the decision-making power. And so the struggle, that's why this struggle, uniquely from the previous engagements that have brought us together, we are coming together not to seek a vote. No. We are coming together not to head for an election. No. We are coming together to do three things. First, to get all the captives by whatever shade or hue, whatever color they put on, as long as you are a captive, our first duty is to get them to wake up to their predicament, to be conscious of their situation.
So we have captives who do not know they are captives.
Absolutely, and that's always the trouble. Because those who capture them, one of the ways they keep them captive is to close their ability to know their situation. Part of the reason our schools are closed, the only country in the entire world whose schools are closed, is because it is a deliberate approach of keeping our people ignorant, of keeping our people uninformed. That's why even the media is controlled. So our first task, and slaves, if you remember the history, domestic slaves in America did not want slavery to end. They thought, okay, they are slaves, but life, is going on. They are having children. They get food. Their masters give them food. They did not actually see why people were endangering them to say they should fight for their freedom. They resisted ending slavery. So yes, our people must realize that the full enjoyment of their lives as citizens of Uganda will come when they are free. That's first. Two, that freedom will be won through a struggle, through fighting for it.
But that
it won't be just given to them.
Yes,
they have to fight for it.
Dr. Besigye,
so that is an
Dr.
awakening.
Besigye, this is not the first time, Dr. Besigye, you're coming out with an idea or even a pressure group. I remember when you just came on board and moved away from NRM, you had something called Reform Agenda. We thought reform was going to happen. Actually, reform never happened. You had something with Walk to Work, trying to create some kind of pressure. It didn't work. There was something called 4GC. It didn't work. There was something called PAFO. It didn't work. Yes. How is this going to be any different?
You see, you amaze me, Patrick, the way you ask these questions. Because how long have you been working?
Many years.
How many?
Many.
For example, maybe over 20.
Yes.
So over 20 years, Patrick wakes up every day and comes to town to work and goes back in the evening tired, frustrated sometimes. But tomorrow he comes back to work. And the other day he comes, and 10 years he's coming. I'm sure your children even say, but Daddy, when will you ever stay with us and we play? You don't have time to play because you are going to work every day. The reason you have never stopped going to work is because what took you to go and work in the first place you have never accomplished. If you are looking for money, you are still looking for it. And as long as you haven't got it, I can assure you tomorrow, you will be on the way going to work. Even when it is raining, you feel uncomfortable, but you jump into the rain to go and work. And in the evening, you go back home. I don't know whether you say now I have used this road from my home to town too many times. I think let me now use the other one so that I don't use the same road to go and look for money. You will still go by the same path until you solve the problem that takes you to town every day. So as long as the freedom that the people of Uganda need, the justice that the people of Uganda need, as long as the voice that our people need to voice their problems so that they are solved has not been achieved, they must keep on struggling. And the way to struggle is not very different. It is the same. And I have told you there are 3 steps. The first one is to get everybody who is in the same situation, oppressed, to understand their situation, to know their responsibility, that they have to do something about it. Secondly, it is to organize. Because even if you all know the problem, unless you unite to get rid of the problem will stay. So organization is a constant in the process of struggle. That's why you could say, you had reform agenda, you had this, yes, organization is a constant in the process of struggle. You can have different names, you can have different, arrangements, but it is all aimed at bringing people with the same purpose together and coordinating their actions to achieve their objectives.
Hold on to your point, retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye. We're going to take a break, and on the spot, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On The Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, who has just launched, and his colleagues, another pressure group, which is called the People's Front for Transition. You know, sometimes I see people of high name recognition, people of influence, people who inspire in political parties like yours. And over time, they have just moved. And yet you understand, you get a sense that these are the people who should have understood the ideas and have looked at Uganda's problem and have understood where you're coming from. But they leave you. It must be lonely, Dr. Besigye, where you're sitting, when you look and see people like the Honorable Sebugwawo have gone, people like Betty Anywera have gone, people like Betty Kamya have gone, and others. And these are the foot soldiers that you have started with, people who could speak and understand the kind of language you're speaking.
Yes,
but they have thrown in the towel.
You see, Patrick, yes, struggle is not a cup of tea. It's not a bed of roses. It's hard because you are challenging those with power, with a lot of power, and who use their power to, in the words of Mr. Museveni, crush any person that moves against them. Their purpose is to crush, to demolish, to destroy anybody who dares question what they are doing. And so it's costly, especially to be a leader in a struggle. It's very, very costly. And it takes sacrifice. And sometimes that's what, from time to time, people don't appreciate.
But really?
Sometimes they think, when we were in the preparation of this coming together, the whole question of leadership comes up. And sometimes people think that it's an honor, to be in leadership, and it's or rather a privilege that you need to compete for this. That's not so in the struggle. Yes, if you are competing to go to parliament, if you are competing to go to government offices, that's a different matter. But if you are competing to go and face the ones who want to crush you,
at the end of the day, Dr. Besigye, you're working so hard so that you can change the minds and the hearts of Ugandans to see what you're able to see, so that you can, as you say, free them from the capture. But if they can see a high-ranking official in the Forum for Democratic Change, like the Honorable Joyce Sebugwawo, who sits in the inner sanctum of FDC, almost giving, like a kick in the gut, and he moves, what are the other people going to think?
No, come on. I mean, Patrick.
A vice president of the party.
Even presidents have crossed, people who were leading political parties have crossed, joined those they were opposing. So that's it. You see, as I have said, a struggle is something that requires a lot of sacrifice. And as I have always said, I have the highest respect myself for anybody who makes whatever level of sacrifice it is in a struggle for freedom. Even if you sacrifice for a day and say that is all I could give, I can't give more, I salute you because you've made a sacrifice. Someone will sacrifice maybe for 2 days, someone for 2 years, somebody for 10 years, somebody for life. People have different levels of sacrifice. It's like the long distance runners. You know, somebody will run very fast but get tired quickly and stop there. Another one will continue, another one. So this should not divert us, as I pointed out to you, in terms of the struggle. The things to interrogate are these. Is there injustice? Is there a problem? If you answer that in the negative, if you say there is no problem, then clearly you don't believe there is need for a struggle. But if you say there is a problem, then the next question is, how do we get rid of this problem? Do we apply ourselves to get rid of it? For how long do we apply ourselves to get rid of it? And as I'm telling you, once the problem is there, once you identify the problem as we have, and not everybody will agree that there is a problem. In fact, there are those who think that this is the best time in their lives, who say party after party, you know, they are enjoying, they don't want anything to change. Those are there. But the ones on whose behalf or in whose territory, from whose territory I speak, are those who recognize the crisis that I have described for you, a human crisis in Uganda.
Where does...
Now, and who want that to be solved. And therefore, who interrogate, who ask, how do we solve this? Shall we solve this by the constitution, as you were saying? That, you know, we shall say, no, we no longer want you, and they go away? There are those who say, yes, that is possible. We have no problem with that. Anybody who thinks that, you know, they should wait for 2026 and go and vote, and if they are not happy, vote out what they are unhappy about, we have no problems with them. But as society, or disease, we have different approaches. So those of us whom we are talking about, the Front for Transition, who want a transition, and a specific transition from gun rule, from captivity to freedom. Those who want that transition must commit themselves to fight for it until it is achieved.
You see,
whether it takes 1 day, whether it takes 1 year, whether it takes, we must commit to fighting it until it is achieved.
During the general, in the general election that we've just concluded this year,
I have pointed out,
the people of Buganda and the people of Busoga actually showed us that they can change the leaders through an election, and they did it. Almost entire Buganda said no to NRM. Almost more than half of Busoga said no to NRM.
Yes.
And their votes were not stolen.
They are not the first ones, as you know. The people of northern Uganda were saying no to NRM. The people of other places were saying no to NRM. Did that change the crisis?
No, you needed to work harder.
So, you know, the thing is, when we talk about gun rule, capture of the state, when we talk about captivity and capture of the state, what we mean is that, you know, all the state institutions are actually captured. Is there power in parliament? That is a question that Ugandans should debate. Do parliamentarians have power? And my very unequivocal answer is no. There is no power in parliament. Is there power in the judiciary? My unequivocal answer is that no, there is no power in the judiciary. That's why soldiers come to the courts, beat up judicial officers, change what the judiciary has said. That's what happens, you know. So power in this country, if you want to know what this struggle is about, is that power is held by those with guns. So if you come and say, you know, because I won an election as a councillor, and therefore, you know, it will be possible to get power in Uganda by voting, you are lost. Because even, as I told you, those who hold power by force, don't keep it just by force. That is how they got the power. It is the main way they keep it, but they also engage in other things. One is a deception. That's why they hold the regular elections. Deception. Create a sense that people can vote and express their... That's what they say. And you see, Mr. Museveni should know that more than anybody else, because he went to the bush after the election. There was a government, elected government. He participated in the election. So why did he go to the bush if he doesn't know that elections can be rigged? What was he doing in the bush? You know? So elections can be used just for deception, as is happening here now. And so you don't use that and say, oh, the other one won an election, therefore. So what has changed for Buganda? Buganda won an election against NRM. What has changed for Buganda? Anything?
Well, you should have worked hard as opposition.
Where are the drones? Where are the drones terrorizing people now? And what power do the people of Buganda have to stop the drones terrorizing them? What power did the people of Kasese, who entirely voted against NRM, what power did they have when the guns went there and massacred all of them? What power did they have? Who is the king of Kasese, of the Wenzuru? Is he in his kingdom? But they voted. So if they voted, why is the king in prison? So this is what we are saying, that it is simply that those of us who believe that we live under a terror regime, actually terrorist regime, that has usurped the power of the people. People have no power to decide. And therefore, the entire country serves very few people. So very few people, those who hold real power, are served by the whole country. The whole country is going down, a few people are aware of. Those who want to also enjoy their country, who want to free themselves, especially now in this terrible, terrible crisis that we live in now. You know, let me tell you, Patrick, the reason we say transition is because we don't think that what needs to be changed can just be changed by adjusting a few things. No. We need a fundamental reset. We need a fundamental reset of the whole system so that, you know, the crisis, the fundamental crisis in the country can be adequately addressed. For example, we've been talking about education. The education crisis in Uganda won't be solved by just announcing the date when schools will open. That's nonsense. It is going to take much, much more than just announcing we are opening schools for the education crisis to be addressed. Because now, even as I said, even before COVID, in the public schools, there was no knowledge. And everybody knows that. And why? Because we don't invest there. You find that the whole education of a kid for a year is $2, which we are investing as a country. Are you serious about giving that kid knowledge? No. So we need a fundamental reset, because as I have pointed out to you, education is the anchor, is the foundation of anything in a country. The reason people have no jobs is they have no knowledge. People are coming from Makerere, they have no knowledge. They cannot get jobs because actually they would not need jobs, they would create the jobs, because the knowledge we acquire is knowledge to solve problems. And once you are in the process of solving any problem, you create jobs. But if you don't know how to solve any problem, you are a problem yourself. And so our education system is churning out problems rather than solutions. That's why we need a fundamental reset. We now have apartheid education, where government schools, no knowledge at all. Private schools, some knowledge. International schools, that's where the knowledge is. So how can we live in a country with an apartheid system?
So yes,
when we fought to remove apartheid in South Africa,
you have
the remaining part of apartheid.
You have diagnosed the problem, Dr. Besigye. I just want to know how the application of the medicine using the front that you have just launched in the coming months and years, since you're not even looking at a vote, you're looking at changing people's views and freeing them. I just want to know the how. How do they get on board? How do they say, okay, this time around, let us rally around Dr. Besigye or the people who are talking about the transition?
This is not about rallying around anybody. You don't have to rally around me. You rally around the problems that you face, and together we rally around our problems and fight them. It's not rallying around people. That's the election mentality, that you are rallying around a candidate to choose a leader. No, this struggle is not about leadership. So we don't need anybody to run around anybody. We must rally around the crisis that is killing us, and together break it up and have the transition. So the transition have a reset, and we have some good ideas about what the reset will take. But we have offered ourselves 2-3 weeks from today to also engage other stakeholders within these 3 weeks about this whole process. From now to transition, how transition should be managed, up to when we live in the country we all desire.
So now you want to engage other leaders. We want to know who now is in the people's front for transition.
So we are
who is in this people's front for transition? If we're talking about political groupings.
That is what was unveiled today. So that is no longer a matter of news. There are a number of political groupings, a number of pressure groupings, individuals, and it is open.
Where is the National Unity Platform?
It is open for all who want to struggle.
So where is NUP in this struggle?
Where? Do you know their office?
I'm asking you because you have just launched a struggle.
Yes.
Where are they in the struggle you have launched with your colleagues?
I think, I wouldn't want to be the one to talk for them. What I can say is that in the process of...
But at this moment, NUP is not with you.
Yes, in the process...
How can you not have Uganda's biggest political opposition party not working with you?
Wait. In the process of bringing together all the people that met this morning, every political formation amongst the formations that we believe are among the oppressed was engaged, intensely engaged about all this. But organizations have processes. Every organization has its own processes. Some may even want to first hold a delegates conference and ask all its members. Others may want to consult in different ways. So some of the entities that we engaged informed us that they are still having processes.
Does that include the NUP?
Absolutely. Have processes of internal consultations. And when they are ready, as I have said, this is an open-ended front. Anybody can struggle from it. As I have pointed out, it's not even a front where leadership can be the problem.
But it will need leadership.
It has leadership.
Yeah, and some people may have a problem with leadership, and they think maybe so and so shouldn't be the leader in that pressure group.
Yeah, but a leader comes out of those who come together. So, would they have felt that if they joined others, they wouldn't be leaders or what? Because people, once they gather, they say now from us who should coordinate our work. As I have said, this is not about leaders, which you were asking, rallying around leaders. This is rallying around problems. But people say, who will coordinate us as we go to attack the problem? And whoever is on the table, actually in the struggle, it's the hands that are few, like you were pointing out. The elites especially don't want to get their hands dirty. So the hands in the struggle are few. So nobody could stay away because of leadership, because we didn't know who would even be given a task to coordinate. Maybe if Nup was on the table, it would be the coordinator. I don't know. So, but this is not about, you know, the focus of what we are doing is not, and we would like to plead with anybody who is, you know, coming to get involved in the struggle, not to dwell on individuals or no. We must dwell on where the problem lies. I have been asked to coordinate the activities now, but if anybody feels that, you know, this is, they are left out because of not being able to coordinate the activities, I would very, very happily, you know, leave anybody to coordinate. As I have said, it's not a pleasant thing. It's not something that is enjoyable, that certainly there is no pay, there is no allowance, we depend on our own struggles to do whatever we do. So if anybody wants to have a role, including the role I have now, I am the most happy to give them the role, provided we are dealing with the problem that has to be dealt with. On that, there is no compromise. If there were people who are indeed tackling the problem, we wouldn't even be here today. We would join them and tackle the problem.
Dr. Besige, you're putting a lot of your time, I suppose even your resources, you have sacrificed to try and push for what you believe in that is right for Uganda. Almost 20 years, more than 20 years, challenging the presidency of Yoweri Museveni. Do you see yourself?
Well, my adult life actually,
yes.
Because even before.
But then you are colleagues with him. So,
yes.
But
so,
now you're not.
But it was still the same struggle. It's the same struggle.
But if I may use the biblical analogy, is it crystallizing to you clearly that you're likely to be the John the Baptist or Moses, not the one who's going to finish the job?
Well, I didn't even start the job. I think Moses started it. He took people from Egypt and got a mission to take them to where they needed to go. I wouldn't arrogate myself to that kind of role, because this struggle, as I have been telling you, started before I was even conscious politically. It started with the fight for independence even, you know, started way back, fighting injustice from outside. That phase of the struggle, our people won and got freedom from foreign control. Unfortunately, local tyrants emerged using the same tools that the foreigners used, the same guns. The local ones also took them up and became the new problem. So this is the second phase of the struggle. The first one was against colonial domination. This one is against domestic domination. And in both struggles, I am late, karma on the scene. So I can't be anywhere comparable to Moses or John the Baptist or whatever your analogy was. What I can say without any fear of contradiction is that I was born into the crisis. I realized it when I was a young man and made a decision to apply myself to the resolution of that crisis. And that's how I ended up in the bush. That's how I ended up where I am even now, many years after. So nearly my entire adult life has been spent in this kind of struggle. I have no regrets whatsoever for the kind of challenges I have met, and they have been many. Sometimes I regret that maybe my own personal decisions have very adversely impacted others who may not have been that adversely impacted. That I regret, but I have never regretted my own decisions and actions. And I am very optimistic. You see, sometimes, Patrick, what people don't realize, even as you ask, you have been involved in this, they don't realize the progress that has also been made. Political progress is in many ways a slow process that you may equate to the process of a child's growth. There is no moment you will go back home and realize that your kid has grown. You say, but today you have grown. No. Every day you look at the kid, it is the same kid. But, 1 year, 2 years, in 10 years, they are making their own choices and whatever. And in a few years, they are fully fledged individuals. So it's the same struggle. Some people may not appreciate how far it has come. For example, I was saying that the first step that we all have to achieve is awakening people to be conscious of what the problem is and to participate in solving it.
But if you are able to attract people, men and women of substance, into your inner circle, and Dr. Besigye, you have challenges retaining them there, to hold them there, to stay with you and walk the talk, then there's a big problem. Because I insist, when I see big names, the big guns like Madam Sevugwao walk, then I can understand that.
Walk where?
Walk away
to
the NRM from you.
And how many have left the NRM? Because you see, that's again the misanalysis that Ugandans engage in. In 1986, 1996, everybody in Uganda was saying we are NRM. And even everybody was by law actually NRM. We were NRM leaders. So even before you talk about those who are heading the other direction, talk about those who are heading out. Because if you see, even with all the rigging, the murder, the terror that happens in elections, and which happens precisely because they know that they cannot win. But in spite of that, millions.
There is a problem when
millions vote against.
There is a big problem when a vice president of a party just walks away and joins the opposition, the party you are reveling against. There is a big problem. She is showing us.
You see.
No,
again,
Dr. Besigye, I know you can say belittle that, but it's big deal to have a vice president of your party move away. It's a big deal, Dr. Besigye.
Vice President Sevugwao does not get any salary from FDC, does not get any allowance of any kind.
The political conviction.
Honorable Amama Mbabazi was Prime Minister with the helicopters, with the free transport, with allowances, with the soldiers guarding him. He left NRM. So, how do you compare Sevugwao? Where would the problem rather be? if people are living even where there are things to gain personally, and those who are heading to try and gain something personally, how would you even compare the two? You know, how many people have left the junta? All these powerful people you are talking about who are in the opposition, sometimes who head back, run away from that same problem, you know? So this, as I pointed out, you like going back to the same thing, but I pointed out that in the struggle, the critical thing to identify is there a reason for struggle? Is there injustice? If there is no reason for struggle, then there is no need even to discuss those who are leaving the struggle or those who are coming. Okay. But if there is a reason for struggle, yes, some people will give up, but as long as the reason remains, people will continue struggling.
Hold on to your point, Dr. Kizza Besigye. We're going to take a break, and On the Spot we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. My guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, and we're talking about the launch of the People's Front for Transition that he participated in, and now he's the coordinator of this pressure group. I know, Dr. Besigye, if you are to find the political dividends you are seeking, you need to move at least with the big majority of the Ugandan elite so that they can be with you. But it appears the Ugandan elite are comfortable. Actually, when you talk about party after party, it is true. People have party after party and they're comfortable and moving on. And yet, there are men and women of influence who perhaps may not appreciate Uganda the way you do. It's going to be a Herculean task for Dr. Besigye to bring them on board so that they can see Uganda just like you see it.
Well, first of all, it is not true, as I pointed out even earlier, that for change and, important changes to take place in the country, that you need, very many elites to be on board. That is, it's not even, it has never been the nature of elites. The nature of elites is that they jump on the bandwagon. That is the nature of the majority of elites. Because elites, as you've pointed out, prefer comfort. And they think they have earned it by maybe studying and having a lot of qualifications and, having options. They can work in Uganda, they can go abroad, they have options. So, in the majority of cases, they don't want to soil their hands, which the struggle is about. The struggle is about soiling your hands, unfortunately. Doing the tough things, being in uncomfortable places, including prisons, including under tear gas, under kiboko, under including, of course, even the risk of losing life. So the elites generally are not attracted to making those kinds of sacrifices. Even the struggle that brought the NRM into power did not have a lot of elites, as you know. It was ordinary people of Luwero who fought very, very valiantly and won a war. Ordinary people who did not speak English, who did not do what, they were the commanders. They ran, they fought and won a war. So there may have been a sprinkling of some elites, but
like yourselves.
But the war was won by ordinary people. So even now, the people who have been mainly in the struggle have been ordinary people. Boda-bodas, market people, taxi drivers, batembei. Because again, those are the most marginalized. They are the ones who face the brunt of the injustices that our country faces. You know, these old women carrying a basket of bananas. That is all the stock that that woman has. That is all she's looking up to take back something to look after her family. And KCC just comes and grabs it, says you have no license, you are, and they take it away. You know, it is that woman who will be the champion of the struggle more than Patrick, who maybe has an air-conditioned car and comes to MTV and he works from an air-conditioned office and gets enough money to go to the market.
You can really imagine, can't you? The imagination is in overdrive. Okay?
So Patrick is not the one inclined to fight. It is the Mutembei woman who is going to be the fighter and who will be on the front line. But when the Mutembei woman is about to win the war, then the Patricks will come running to say, oh, by the way, you know, we are quietly supporting also. And they want to be now the leaders so that they continue benefiting. That is the nature of life. But having said that, I get a sense that now things have changed.
How?
And maybe, you know, every bad situation, as they say, has some kind of a silver lining. I think COVID has sort of shaken quite a lot of those comfortable people out of their comfort. I get a sense now that, you know, people who were in business, you remember sometimes the businessmen were saying, people, you know, demonstrators shouldn't come to town to disrupt our businesses. Now, from what I hear, you know, businessmen were crying that they opened their businesses. They were opened, but they are crying because nobody is buying. And the little money they sell, they eat. Taxes have shot up. The businesses have never been as harshly taxed as they are today. So in fact, they are slaving for nothing. They are eating their capital. They are closing their shops. Many of the people who are trading here, you now find them in Busika, in where, you know, the things are tough. The people who had jobs in the hotels, in the what, they were laid off. They are now on the streets, seeing how hard it is to live. So people's livelihoods, beyond those who had ordinarily been facing hardships, now everybody, more people, except the untouchables, those who hold the country captive, but these assistants of theirs, the ones whom they use to do their odd errands, those they are much fewer are wanted, and therefore many of them are now facing similar challenges. And that is why I'm hopeful that this call for action should and will, I believe, will be embraced by all the people who are suffering, teachers at all levels, whether in the university, where students are the engines of revolutions. Students, you know, there are no people who are suffering, who have suffered, who are still suffering like students, suffering to gain knowledge that they want to gain, but even more critically, knowing that they have no future where they are going. So we all need to work together. And this, when I say we shall spend 3 weeks consulting all these stakeholders, these are the stakeholders we are going to be talking to: students and youths, market vendors, border borders, taxi drivers, religious leaders, academia, civil society organizations. We want to have a common understanding, first of all, of how we get the great reset that the country needs. Secondly, how it is managed, so that even as we move, we have a clear understanding, a shared vision of the Uganda that we are working towards.
Okay. There's something that has been on the table for discussion the last couple of days, and that is the proposition from President Yoweri Museveni that there should be jail without bail. And knowing that you are one of the biggest beneficiaries of bail, I wonder what has, you've been thinking about that proposition, jail with no bail.
Yeah, thank you. That is a very, very dear subject to me, and I'm glad that you've asked the question. But maybe before I answer it, just to wind up on what happened today, as I have pointed out, the clarion call, the rallying call, is for Ugandans to stand up and to work together for a new situation. And in doing so, we have some aids that we want to use to make people easily associate with what we are doing. First of all, we are saying we would like to say, especially here in Buganda, the idea of all this is twetase. Let's free ourselves, twetase. And that's, so it's like our clarion call, twetase. And we think that anybody who is facing injustice, wherever it is, somebody's trying to get you off the land, off your land, somebody's trying to attack you unjustly, somebody, we want people to start rallying together to protest against any form of injustice. And the starting point is by saying, if you are facing injustice, show it the red card. So our symbol is the red card. You can see the hand holding the red card saying time up. If you are a perpetrator of injustice, time up, Patrick, time up. And if somebody is maybe trying to chase you off the land, then all of us will come to you to rally around you and your cause. As you put this one up, you also blow the whistle, like they do on the pitch. If you are on the pitch and you on the playground playing football or any other game, and you break the rules, you attack people, the referee says...
So some situation and some people need a red card in real life.
Yes, get out, get out. And this is why we are saying time out for injustice, time out. So you blow the whistle, time out. And everybody who is oppressed like we are, we know our friend is getting into trouble, we all rally around you. But as I have said, this is for 2 weeks, 3 weeks as we consult other stakeholders. After 3 weeks, because this platform is for action, it's not for, as I have said, it's not for talking, we have talked enough, we are not going to hold rallies, we are not going to, it's not about talking, it's about action. And so, after 3 weeks, there will be the call to action. And people should ready themselves to take action, to really call in the grand reset, to work towards the grand reset.
What if that turns into violence?
Well, this is a non-violent struggle. We have already said that from the beginning. But as we know, those we oppose, violence is their means of survival. That's why they kill people, You have never seen me holding a stick. You have never seen me throwing a stone or anything, never, in all these 20 years. But I have wounds, from gunshots, from attacks, So yes, we want to remove violent people. And so we may meet violence, but we don't seek to use violence ourselves. And that's why this struggle is unique and fundamental. Because as I told you, it is intended to end gun rule, to end rule by force. That's what we want to end. And we cannot end it when we are also using force. Force begets force. Violence begets violence. So we must defeat them, those who are violent, without using violence. And now we establish the rule of the non-violent. And those who control guns become servants rather than masters. That's what happens in all countries. Power is by civilian people. That's why you could see Obama, Barack Obama, an ordinary lawyer, commanding all the generals in America. He was their commander-in-chief, commanding nuclear weapons. Barack Obama, an ordinary young lawyer. That is where civil authority is supreme. And that is the struggle that we are undertaking. So, anybody using guns, time out. If you want to use guns to force your will on others, it's time out. And you will see it soon or later. Your time is out. People must regain their influence and control over their country. This is what this is about.
All right. Operation Twitter.
So now coming back to the question of bail. You see, again, this is not surprising coming from Mr. Museveni or coming at this time. It's not surprising at all. Because Mr. Museveni knows very well that he is under siege by people who want him out. He knows this very well. That's why him and anybody serving him live in Uganda as if they live in a war zone. If you see Mr. Museveni moving from one place to another, you'll be excused to think that, you know, this is somebody moving in the hills of the Taliban when the war was going on, you know? Because you will see all kinds of guns and people, you know, all over the place, and they will stop vehicles long before he even appears. You know, the biggest jams in town come if he's going to pass in town, because they must clear all roads long before he comes so that he can see with all his guns. And why? Because he fears the people he leads. He knows that they are fed up. He knows this very well. You know, he has known this for a long time. He knows it. You saw in the campaigns, you know, how he looked very sheepishly in Ruwero town, where he launched the war for freedom. You saw how he was passing through Ruwero as the people of Ruwero were casting and, you know, throwing saliva to him and everything, you know. So he knows that if the Ruwero people who brought him to power are treating him that way, he knows what the people of Acholi think about him. He knows what the people in Buganda think about him all over. He knows now what the people of Rukonjiri and other places. So he knows he's besieged. And in order to maintain his power over people who want him out, he needs extraordinary tools. First of all, he needs to be as frightening as possible, to cause terror in people's minds. And this is why, for me, I was saying, even those Bijambia, you know, after every election, there is a state of terror. This is not the first one. You know, don't forget Kasese was after the last one. Even before that, they, you know, you remember when bombs were being thrown in Kampala, at the taxi park, in the bars, in the what, after an election. So it's not new. After an election, because that's when tempers are high, after robbing people's voices again, they create a state of terror. And part of that terror, because they know that people can indeed rise up, they want power to detain, especially leaders.
But have you realized that in the parliament, the proposition to remove bail before jail, or jail with no bail, NRM members of parliament have defied their own chairman? Isn't that something new? Is that what you call the silver lining on the dark cloud?
Well, they are still defying. It's not over, because as you know, we have seen many times when they have stood in parliament and made strong resolutions that are in line indeed with what people feel. That is before they take them to Changwanzi. And they come back from Changwanzi and make the totally opposite resolution. The same people. Or even if they don't have to go to Changwanzi, Museveni comes to parliament. And they start saying, oh, we hadn't to go to this explanation. If we had got this, you know, things would, oh no, now we understand, this is okay. Why? Because you see, most of those members of parliament were brought to parliament by Museveni. He's hard cash, he's the one who pays their way out to come to parliament. Or his soldiers beating up their opponents and bringing them to parliament. So, if they know that he also has power to throw them out, you know, and so they are now caught between the rock and the hard place, as the saying goes, because they also know that this is not an ordinary resolution like the ones they normally change, whether it is oil, they can change and give all the oil to Museveni, but this also has a potential to deal with them, because we have seen MPs also arrested. In fact, some people have very, very short memories. Sometimes I saw last week, Honorable Baryomunsi, you know, now, who having been made a minister, if you see him, you may think that, Baryomunsi is floating somewhere in the skies. He has forgotten that this is just a Kanungu boy. Baryomunsi, if you see him moving, you see, he's like Museveni, there is a truck of soldiers ahead of him, a truck of soldiers behind him. You wonder, what is Baryomunsi fearing? It's Kanungu. But so I saw him, talking now as if, it's all right to have, But those who don't have as short a memory as Baryomunsi, will know. Amama Mbabazi was very, very key in, pushing these things through. In fact, some of the things he pushed through, very, very shortly after that, he met them down the road. And we were pulling his, we were pricking his cheek. You remember your works, when he was being captured from Ginger Bridge. And, so the MPs are now between the rock and the hard place, because they know this thing is coming for them also. The other time, I heard Kutesa, the minister, now I think is retired, Sam Kutesa, Nasa Asira, they had been arrested and they were in court applying for bail. They didn't want to get into prison. And I heard them saying, you remember, your worship in the Kizza Besigye case, the court ruled that, bail is a constitutional right. So they were happy to take advantage of the road that I opened as a prisoner. Because now they were also prisoners. And they were still NRM. They were even more, I think they were much, much more NRM than these were Musis. You know, so, you know, it's up to them.
Okay.
It's up to them. This has a long history. Even in the 60s, the people in the 60s, Milton Obote, President Obote, found himself in very much the same circumstances as Museveni, where people were against him, especially here in Buganda, after he had destroyed the kingdom and so on. And so he enacted a law called the Emergency Powers Detention Act, which provided that the Minister of Internal Affairs could sign a detention order on anybody without any reason, giving any reason, and you would be locked up for 6 months without trial, which he could renew by just signing another order, and you stay there for as long as they renew your order. Now, that law was abolished in 1986 by this government, you know, but the ones who enacted it in 1968, they were the first ones to be imprisoned on it. The ministers, the Lingeras and the others who were taken to Karamoja were the very people who had passed that law.
Dr. Besigye, our time is almost out. As we conclude, and very briefly, I hope you are aware that when you go to start your consultation with the border, with the market people and all this kind of stuff, and this kind of people, that is likely to bring you in a collusion course with the men and women in uniform and as usual, chaos on the streets of Kampala.
Well, you see, as I pointed out to you, we shall not compromise our rights for any reason at all. So it is up to those who violate our rights to choose. If they want to violate our rights, let them try. We shall resist them. This is the real resistance. Forget about these people who say they are resistance when they are in the government. You are resisting who? If you are in the government. National resistance. Resisting who? You know? The people of Uganda are going to resist them. Real resistance. They haven't seen resistance. They are still just, joking. So, we know that there are challenges ahead. We are familiar. It's not a new territory. We know there are challenges ahead. We have learned from our history. We are not poor students of our past. So we hope we are better prepared than we were. You know, you have seen that in the last maybe nearly 3 years, I have not come to town to protest. It's not because there was nothing to protest. It's not because I have no capacity to protest. But it's because the kind of protest we were engaged in took us some distance, but failed to take us the whole home. And so we had to interrogate that. If this hasn't worked, how do we tweak it? And so, every day comes with new approaches. It's 3 weeks, and we shall be back.
And the drones are also going to engage. The coordinators will be picked one by one, and before you know it, the movement has no leader.
Karibu, the movement will never, the front will never lack leaders, because Ugandans who are oppressed are the leaders of this front. As I told you, this is not about leaders, you know, who put on neckties and go in the cars that are comfortable. No, this is not the leadership we need here.
Dr. Besigye, our time is almost out. What's going to be your parting shot, if you can tell the people of Uganda in 30 seconds?
Well, our dear brothers and sisters, wherever you are monitoring us from, if you are in the category that I have been describing, a category that toils but never enjoys their toil, toils on behalf of others, that does not get services in spite of heavy taxes, that faces every day injustices, that you never walk in your country as if it is your country. Here we come. Here we come. Just be prepared.
Thank you.
We deserve and must have a different type of country.
Thank you.
This type of country, it's time up. Change must come.
All right, looks like Dr. Besigye was showing this program tonight as time up. But thank you so much, sir, for your time. Most importantly, thank you for your insight. You have listened to Dr. Kizza Besigye, what he has in store, what he wants to do, and he says some people or some systems in real life.
Not just me, what Ugandans.
He says some people and some situations need a red card in real life. He's launching Operation Twetase. Maybe you can join him, maybe you cannot. But he has explained how he sees Uganda tonight. It's up to you to choose what you think is right. Good night, and God bless Uganda.